The morning sun cast long shadows across Fifth Avenue as a well-dressed woman stood outside Lux & Co., one of Manhattan's most prestigious boutiques. Her reflection shimmered in the darkly tinted windows, showing her designer blazer and perfectly tailored pants, an outfit that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd just wrapped up a successful meeting with investors where she'd secured another round of funding for her tech consulting firm, and she wanted to treat herself to something special. The brass handles of the heavy glass doors felt cool under her fingers, but before she could pull them open, a burly security guard stepped in front of her. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying a note of rehearsed authority. "We're closed for a private event right now." She blinked, momentarily confused. Through the crystal-clear windows, she could see at least a dozen customers browsing freely inside. A group of women were trying on designer shoes, laughing as they modeled them for each other. An elderly gentleman was being shown what looked like an expensive watch. None of it suggested a private event. "There seems to be some mistake," she said calmly, gesturing toward the shoppers inside. "I can clearly see customers shopping." The security guard shifted his weight, his expression hardening. "Like I said, it's a private event, members only." 20 years of building a successful tech company had taught her to read between the lines. She knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't the first time, and sadly probably wouldn't be the last. Despite her Stanford MBA, despite building a company valued at over $100 million, despite being featured in Forbes 40 Under 40, she was still being judged by the color of her skin. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check something while actually taking a video of the scene. Inside, a sales associate was welcoming a new customer with a champagne flute. Apparently, the private event had room for some people. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was because she'd just closed a major deal, or maybe she was just tired of these subtle, and not so subtle, forms of discrimination. Instead of feeling angry or hurt, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. Her mind, always quick to spot business opportunities, began working on a different level. She took one last look at the store's elegant facade, noting the building's architecture and prime location. A plan was already forming in her mind, one that would take time, resources, and careful execution. But she hadn't built a successful company by backing down from challenges. "Thank you for letting me know about the private event," she said to the security guard, her voice steady and professional. "I'll be sure to come back another time." The guard nodded, probably thinking he'd won this small battle of wills. As she walked away, she pulled out her phone again, this time to make a call. "Hey, it's me," she said to her assistant. "I need you to get me everything you can about the building that houses Lux & Co. property records, ownership history, current market value, everything." She paused at a crosswalk, watching the steady stream of luxury cars and yellow cabs flow past. "And contact our real estate attorney. I think it's time we diversified our investment portfolio." The security guard, still visible in the distance, had no idea that his discrimination had just set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just Lux & Co., but the entire luxury retail landscape in Manhattan. Sometimes the best response to prejudice isn't anger or resignation, it's excellence executed with purpose. And she had a purpose now. This wasn't about revenge, it was about creating change in a way that couldn't be ignored. In the world of high-end retail, money talked. And she was about to make a statement that would be impossible to dismiss. In the weeks following the incident at Lux & Co., the tech CEO threw herself into research with the same intensity that had helped her build her company from scratch. Her corner office, with its stunning view of the Manhattan skyline, became command central for what she called Project Transform. Her assistant had compiled a thick folder of information about the building. Interesting patterns began emerging as she spread the documents across her glass conference table. The property had been in the same family's hands for 3 generations, but recently there had been quiet discussions about selling. The current owners were getting older, and their children showed more interest in their Hampton Beach houses than managing Manhattan real estate. "Look at this," she said to her financial advisor during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "The building's lease is ending in 8 months. She pointed to a document showing the property's current market analysis. "And they're trying to keep the potential sale quiet to avoid disturbing current tenants." But the building's status wasn't the only thing she discovered. As she dug deeper, a troubling pattern emerged at Lux & Co. Her social media team had put out discreet inquiries, and the responses were eye-opening. Messages flooded in from other successful professionals who shared similar experiences at the store. A renowned heart surgeon described being told they were closing early when she tried to buy an anniversary gift for her husband. A prominent entertainment lawyer mentioned how the security guard always happened to need to check his bag, but never seemed to check other customers. A celebrated artist talked about being followed around the store like she might steal something, despite wearing clothes from their own previous collection. She started documenting everything meticulously. Each incident, every response, all the patterns. They'd formed a clear picture of systemic discrimination hidden behind elegant window displays and expensive price tags. But she wasn't collecting this information to shame anyone or create negative publicity. No, she had a different approach in mind. During this time, she also reached out to her network of real estate contacts, carefully feeling out the situation. "I'm looking to diversify my investment portfolio," she would say during lunch meetings or charity events. Particularly interested in premium retail locations. She never mentioned Lux & Co. specifically. In Manhattan's real estate world, discretion was everything. Her team created a new shell company, registered in Delaware for privacy. The paperwork listed only her lawyers as representatives. In the high-stakes world of Manhattan real estate, anonymity could be a powerful advantage. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the element of surprise was worth more than any amount of money. One evening, as she was reviewing property valuations, her assistant brought in some interesting news. "The store's customer satisfaction ratings have been dropping steadily for the past 3 years," she reported. "They're losing market share to more inclusive luxury retailers downtown." This information sparked an idea. She spent the next few days creating a detailed business plan, not just for buying the building, but for transforming it into something revolutionary. Her vision went beyond just acquiring prime real estate. She wanted to create a template for change that other businesses would want to follow. She brought in consultants from the retail industry, diversity experts, and marketing specialists. Each meeting added new layers to her plan, but she kept the true purpose close to her chest. To everyone else, this was just another smart business investment. Only she knew it was about creating lasting change in an industry that desperately needed it. "The numbers look solid," her financial advisor said during their final review. "But this is significantly more than we initially planned to invest in real estate this year. Are you sure about this?" Looking out her office window at the bustling city below, she smiled. "Sometimes the best investments aren't about immediate returns," she replied. "They're about changing the game entirely." By the end of the month, she had everything in place: the shell company, the financing, the business plan, and most importantly, the evidence of why this transformation was necessary. Her plan wasn't born from anger or revenge. It came from a deep understanding that real change requires strategy, patience, and a vision bigger than personal satisfaction. She picked up a photo of her grandmother that sat on her desk, remembering the stories of doors that had been closed to her generation. "Times are changing," she whispered to the photograph. "And sometimes we need to be the ones to push those changes forward." With all her research complete and her strategy in place, she was ready for the next phase. It was time to make her move in the high-stakes game of Manhattan real estate. But first, she had one more call to make, to the one person who had taught her that the best way to fight discrimination wasn't with anger, but with excellence and strategic thinking. The real estate game in Manhattan was like a complex chess match, and our tech CEO was about to make her most strategic move yet. She sat in her lawyer's office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork, each document carefully crafted to keep her identity hidden during the upcoming negotiations. "Everything's in place," her lawyer said, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany desk. "The shell company looks completely legitimate, just another investment firm interested in prime Manhattan real estate. Nobody will know you're behind it until you want them to." She picked up the folder, thinking about how far she'd come from her childhood days when her mother worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. Now here she was, about to make a multi-million-dollar real estate deal. But this wasn't just about money, it was about making a statement that couldn't be ignored. The first meeting with the property management company was set up at a prestigious downtown restaurant. Her legal team had chosen the perfect representative, a senior partner who specialized in high-end real estate deals. He knew the script: show interest, but not too much. Ask the right questions, but not too many. In Manhattan's real estate world, appearing too eager could cost you millions. The building has excellent bones, the property manager said, spreading out architectural drawings on the restaurant table. The location is unbeatable, and the current tenants are all high-end retailers with strong leases. He paused, taking a sip of water. Of course, the price reflects these advantages. Of course, the lawyer replied smoothly. Our client understands the value of premium real estate. They're particularly interested in properties with potential for improvement. Back in her office, she received hourly updates about the negotiations. Each message made her more certain that this was the right move. The asking price was steep, $12.8 million, but she knew the true value wasn't just in the building itself. It was in what it represented and what it could become. Late one evening, as she was reviewing the latest counteroffer, her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. When they won't let you through the front door, sometimes you need to buy the whole house. She smiled, remembering how her grandmother had saved every penny to buy the small beauty salon where she'd previously been refused a job. Some lessons crossed generations. The negotiations continued for weeks. Her team played their parts perfectly, maintaining the image of just another investment firm looking to expand its portfolio. They discussed maintenance costs, tax implications, and potential improvements, all the normal things real estate investors talk about. But beneath every conversation lay her true purpose, carefully hidden but always present. She kept working regular hours at her tech company, attending meetings, making decisions, growing her business. Nobody except her closest advisors knew she was orchestrating one of the biggest moves of her career. The security guard at Lux & Co. still stood at his post, probably having forgotten all about the woman he turned away months ago. But she hadn't forgotten. They're willing to accept our offer, her lawyer announced one morning. But they want to close quickly. They're asking for proof of funds within 48 hours. She was ready. The money had been sitting in an escrow account for weeks, waiting for this moment. Her financial team had structured the deal perfectly, part liquid assets, part financing, all arranged through the shell company. The paperwork was flawless. Do it, she said simply. The next few days passed in a blur of signatures and legal documents. Each paper she signed brought her closer to her goal. Her lawyer handled most of the face-to-face meetings, maintaining her anonymity. The sellers never questioned who was behind the purchase. In Manhattan, many buyers preferred to remain anonymous. Finally, it was done. The deed was transferred, the money changed hands, and she became the owner of one of the most prestigious retail locations in Manhattan. The building that housed the store that had turned her away was now hers. But she didn't celebrate, not yet. This was just the beginning. The real work would start now. She pulled out her notebook where she'd written her plans for transforming not just the building, but the entire culture it represented. Send the standard notice to all tenants, she instructed her lawyer. Business as usual for now. Let's not make any waves yet. As she looked out her office window at the sunset painting the Manhattan skyline in shades of gold and pink, she thought about all the people who'd been turned away from high-end stores over the years. All the subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination that happened behind elegant facades and expensive window displays. Change is coming, she whispered to herself. But first, let's make sure everything is perfectly in place. The real estate deal was complete, but her plan was just beginning to unfold. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest steps, and she was about to take the next one. The store's management had no idea that their world was about to change, and that the change would come from the very person they'd once turned away. The morning of the final negotiations dawned bright and clear over Manhattan. The tech CEO adjusted her suit jacket as she entered her lawyer's office, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Today was the day everything would change, though nobody else knew it yet. The sellers are getting antsy, her lawyer said, organizing a stack of documents on his desk. They're worried about their other tenants finding out about the sale before it's final, especially Lux & Co. Apparently, they're particularly sensitive about ownership changes. A small smile crossed her face. I can imagine they would be, she said quietly, thinking about the store's discriminatory practices. Let's make sure everything goes smoothly then. The conference room was filled with lawyers, real estate agents, and financial advisors, all the players needed for a major property deal in Manhattan. She watched from her office via secure video link as her legal team handled the final negotiations. Nobody in that room knew that the real buyer was watching everything unfold. The seller's representative, an older man with silver hair and an expensive watch, seemed eager to close the deal. "Your offer is very generous," he said, shuffling through the paperwork. "But we need some assurances about the future of the current tenants." Her lead lawyer handled it perfectly. "Our client understands the value of maintaining prestigious retail spaces," he said smoothly. "We have no immediate plans for significant changes." It wasn't exactly a lie. The changes she planned wouldn't happen immediately. The numbers being discussed made her think back to her early days in business. She remembered her first office, a tiny space she could barely afford, with second-hand furniture and a coffee maker that never worked quite right. Now here she was, about to spend $12.8 million on a building. But this wasn't just a purchase, it was an investment in change. Her phone buzzed with updates throughout the day. Each message brought news of another document signed, another condition met, another step closer to her goal. She kept working on her tech company's projects, taking calls and attending meetings, acting as if it was just another normal day. Late in the afternoon, a crucial moment arrived. The sellers wanted proof of funds, immediate evidence that she could actually pay what she was offering. She'd been ready for this. With a few clicks on her computer, she authorized the transfer of funds to the escrow account. Years of smart business decisions and careful saving had prepared her for this moment. The money's cleared, her banker confirmed an hour later. Everything's in order. The sellers were impressed by the speed of the transfer. In the world of Manhattan real estate, being able to move that much money quickly was a sign of serious business. They didn't know that their buyer was someone their prime tenant had once turned away at the door. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the skyscrapers, the final documents were ready for signature. Her lawyer called with the news. "Everything's prepared. We just need your final authorization." She thought about all the people who'd faced discrimination in high-end stores, all the subtle and not-so-subtle ways they'd been made to feel unwelcome. She thought about her grandmother, who'd never been allowed to shop in places like Lux & Co. She thought about the young people who still face these barriers today. "Do it," she said firmly. The signatures were handled remotely, another layer of privacy to protect her identity. Each document was signed, notarized, and filed with perfect precision. By the time the last paper was processed, she officially owned one of the most prestigious retail locations in Manhattan. "Congratulations," her lawyer said later. "The building's yours. What's our next move?" She looked out at the city lights twinkling in the evening darkness. "For now, we wait. Let everything continue as normal. Let them think nothing has changed." She paused, a determined look in her eyes. "But start preparing the new lease agreements. We're going to need them soon." That night, as she worked late in her office, she thought about the security guard who'd turned her away from Lux & Co. He was probably standing at his post right now, still turning away people he'd been taught not to welcome. He had no idea that the woman he'd dismissed now owned the very ground he stood on. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about creating change in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Money talked in Manhattan, and she was about to make it say something important. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Schedule a meeting with those diversity consultants we talked about," she said. "It's time to start planning phase 2. The purchase was complete, but it was just the beginning. Sometimes the biggest changes started with signing your name on a dotted line. And she'd just signed hers to a whole new chapter in Manhattan's retail history. 3 months had passed since the purchase was finalized. The tech CEO stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her designer blazer, the same one she'd worn the day she was turned away from Lux & Co. Everything about this moment had been carefully planned, right down to her outfit choice. "All the paperwork is ready," her lawyer had confirmed earlier that morning. "Are you sure you want to do this in person? We could handle it through official channels." "No," she'd replied firmly. "Some moments need to be faced in person." The morning crowds parted around her as she walked down Fifth Avenue, her heels clicking against the sidewalk. Her heart was beating a little faster than usual, but her face remained calm and composed. She'd waited 3 months for this moment, letting everything run as usual while she perfected her plans for change. As she approached Lux & Co., she saw the same security guard standing at his post. He was checking his phone, looking bored, probably thinking it would be just another ordinary day. He looked up as she reached for the door handle, and his expression shifted to that familiar look of practiced authority. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but," he began, stepping forward with his hand raised. "I remember," she cut in smoothly. "Private event, right? Or is it members only today?" Her voice was calm but carried an edge of authority that made him pause. "I think it's time we had a conversation about that." The security guard straightened his spine, falling back on his usual script. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, or I'll need to call the owner," she finished for him. "That won't be necessary. I'm already here." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a leather folder. "I think you'll find these documents interesting. They show that this building, including this store, has been under new ownership for the past 3 months." The guard's expression didn't change at first. He probably dealt with all sorts of claims and complaints. But as she opened the folder and began laying out official documents on the counter near his post, his confidence began to waver. "I'd like to speak with the store manager," she said firmly. "Immediately." Something in her voice must have finally gotten through to him. He picked up his phone with slightly shaky hands and made a call. Within minutes, the store manager appeared, walking briskly toward the entrance with an annoyed expression that quickly turned to concern as he took in the scene. "Is there a problem here?" the manager asked, looking between the security guard and the woman he never bothered to welcome into his store. "Not anymore," she replied, handing him her business card along with the property documents. "Though we did need to discuss some changes to your lease agreement." The manager's face paled as he read through the documents. His hands trembled slightly as he reached the final page, showing her signature as the building's new owner. The security guard peered over his shoulder, his own face draining of color as he realized what was happening. I don't understand," the manager stammered. "Why didn't we know about this sooner?" "I wanted to observe how you run your business without interference," she replied calmly. "To see if what happened to me 3 months ago was an isolated incident." She paused, looking pointedly at both men. Clearly, it wasn't. The morning sun streamed through the store's windows, highlighting the luxury items on display. A few early customers had stopped to watch the scene unfold, their shopping bags hanging forgotten from their hands. "Your lease is up for renewal next month," she continued, her voice steady and professional. "I'm happy to extend it, but there will be new terms. My lawyer will be in touch this afternoon with the details." She turned to face the security guard directly. "Including significant changes to your customer service and security protocols." The manager started to speak, probably to make excuses or offer apologies, but she held up her hand. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for change. Real, lasting change." She gestured at the store around them. "This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one else experiences what I did." She pulled out another folder from her bag. "These are the new lease terms. They include mandatory diversity training for all employees, clear anti-discrimination policies, and regular audits to ensure compliance." She placed it on the counter. "I suggest you review them carefully." The morning sun caught her diamond earrings as she turned to leave, casting tiny rainbows across the walls. She paused at the door, looking back at the still stunned manager and security guard. "Oh, and one more thing. I'll be stopping by regularly now. After all," she smiled, "it's my building." As she walked back out onto Fifth Avenue, she felt lighter somehow. This wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. Real change took time, effort, and dedication. But sometimes it started with a single moment of truth, a single revelation that turned the world upside down. Her phone buzzed with a message from her lawyer, ready to start implementing the new policies. "Yes," she typed back. "It's time for phase 2. Let's show them what real inclusion looks like." The weeks following the big revelation brought winds of change to Lux & Co. The tech CEO didn't just want to make a point. She wanted to create real, lasting transformation. Instead of immediately cleaning house, she took a more thoughtful approach that surprised everyone, even her own legal team. "We're not here to punish," she explained during a meeting with her advisors. "We're here to educate and improve." She spread out her plans across the conference table, each page carefully detailed with steps for positive change. The first phase started with the security team. Rather than firing the guard who turned her away, she did something unexpected. She made him part of the solution. He sat nervously in her office, probably expecting to be fired, when she laid out her vision. "You have experience in what doesn't work," she told him, her voice firm but not unkind. "Now I want you to help us figure out what does." She pushed a folder across her desk. "Would you be interested in leading our new welcome team?" The guard looked stunned. "But after what I did." "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who've learned from their mistakes," she replied. "You know firsthand how it feels to be on the wrong side of discrimination. Now you can help make sure it never happens again." The transformation didn't stop there. She brought in experts in retail diversity and inclusion, not just for one-day workshops, but for ongoing training programs. The store's employees learned about unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and the importance of treating everyone with equal respect. "Your success isn't measured by the price of what someone buys," she explained during one training session. "It's measured by how you make them feel when they walk through those doors." The physical store underwent changes too. The once intimidating entrance was redesigned to feel more welcoming. The harsh, spotlight-style lighting that had made some customers feel like they were under surveillance was replaced with warm, inviting illumination. Even the music changed to include a more diverse range of artists. But the most significant changes were in the store's policies. The old members-only excuse was officially banned. New guidelines required all customers to be greeted with the same level of respect and attention. Mystery shoppers from various backgrounds regularly tested the store's service, ensuring the changes weren't just on paper. The staff started to notice something interesting. As the store became more welcoming, business actually improved. Customers who'd previously felt uncomfortable shopping, they began to come in. Word spread through social media and personal recommendations that Lux & Co. was changing for the better. One day, about 2 months into the transformation, an elderly woman came into the store. She walked with a cane and wore simple clothes, the kind of customer who might have been ignored before. The security guard, now head of the welcome team, greeted her warmly and offered her a comfortable seat while she waited for her granddaughter. "I've walked past this store for 20 years, the woman told him, tears in her eyes. "This is the first time I felt welcome enough to come inside." Stories like this began to multiply. A young entrepreneur made his first major purchase after landing a big contract. A retired teacher bought her first luxury handbag to celebrate 40 years of service. Each story represented not just a sale, but a barrier broken down. The tech CEO made regular visits, not as the owner checking up on her investment, but as someone genuinely interested in the changes taking place. She sat in on training sessions, talked with employees, and listened to customer feedback. "We're not just selling luxury items," she would say. "We're selling an experience, and that experience should be available to everyone who walks through these doors." The store's transformation began attracting attention from other retailers. Representatives from other high-end stores started visiting, taking notes on the changes. Some even reached out to ask for advice on implementing similar programs. One evening, as she walked through the store after closing, she overheard 2 sales associates talking. They were discussing how much more they enjoyed their work now that they could focus on genuinely helping customers instead of judging them. "Remember how we used to profile people at the door?" one said, shaking her head. "I can't believe we thought that was okay." "Now we get to meet the most amazing people," the other replied. "Like that brain surgeon last week, or the artist who bought the vintage collection. We would have missed out on so many incredible stories." Standing there, listening to this conversation, the tech CEO smiled. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, not just a change in policies, but a change in hearts and minds. The transformation wasn't complete yet, but it was well on its way. She pulled out her phone and made a note. Time to start planning Phase 3, expanding the program to other stores. Because sometimes the best way to fight discrimination wasn't with anger or revenge, but with education, understanding, and the courage to be the change you want to see in the world. 1 year had passed since that life-changing morning when a successful tech CEO was turned away from Lux & Co. Now, she stood in the same spot, but everything was different. The store had transformed from a symbol of exclusion into a beacon of change in the luxury retail world. The morning sun streamed through the newly designed windows, catching the "Everyone Welcome" sign that now hung prominently by the entrance. Inside, customers of all backgrounds browsed freely, received the same top-notch service, and felt equally valued, exactly as it should have been all along. "Can you believe how much has changed?" the former security guard, now head of customer relations, asked as he welcomed a young couple into the store. He'd become one of the most passionate advocates for inclusive retail, often sharing his own journey of unlearning bias during training sessions at other stores. The tech CEO watched as he offered the couple a glass of champagne, the same welcome gesture that had once been reserved for only certain customers. "Sometimes," she replied, "change just needs someone to take the first step." Her phone buzzed with another message from a luxury retailer interested in implementing similar changes. This had been happening more and more frequently over the past few months. What started as one store's transformation had sparked a movement across the industry. She walked through the store, noting all the changes. The staff now reflected the diversity of the city itself. The product range had expanded to include pieces from designers of all backgrounds. Even the marketing materials showed a true representation of their customer base, not as a token gesture, but as a genuine reflection of their new reality. But the most significant change wasn't visible on the surface. It was in the stories that emerged day after day. Like the young tech entrepreneur who bought her first designer bag to celebrate her startup success, or the retired teacher who finally felt comfortable enough to treat himself to a luxury watch after 40 years of service. "Your story inspired me to buy my own building," a customer told her one day. She was a successful doctor who'd faced similar discrimination at other high-end stores. "I realized we don't have to accept being treated that way. We can change things ourselves." This was exactly what the CEO had hoped for. Her actions were inspiring others to create change in their own ways. She'd established a foundation to help minority entrepreneurs acquire commercial real estate in prestigious locations, turning her experience into a blueprint for others to follow. The store's success had caught the attention of business schools too. Harvard Business Review wanted to do a case study on how inclusive practices had actually increased profits. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature about how treating all customers with respect wasn't just the right thing to do, it was good business. "We're doing double the sales we did last year," the store manager reported during their monthly meeting. "But more importantly, our customer satisfaction ratings are through the roof." He pulled up the latest surveys on his tablet. "People aren't just buying things here, they're having experiences they want to tell others about." The CEO smiled, remembering her own experience that sparked all this. "That's because we're not just selling luxury items anymore," she said. "We're selling dignity, respect, and inclusion. Those are the real luxury items everyone deserves to have." Late one evening, as she was leaving the store, she overheard a young girl asking her mother, "Can we come back here tomorrow?" The mother, dressed in simple clothes, hesitated for a moment before the sales associate warmly replied, "Of course. We'd love to see you again." That simple exchange meant everything. It meant a new generation would grow up knowing they belonged anywhere they chose to go. They wouldn't have to prove their worth or fight for basic respect. The next morning, she called a meeting with her foundation's board. "It's time to expand," she announced. "There are still too many places where people face discrimination. We need to help others do what we did here." Her phone buzzed again. Another message from a store owner wanting to learn about their inclusion training program. She smiled as she typed her response. "Change isn't just possible, it's profitable. Let me show you how." As she looked out at the bustling store, she thought about that morning a year ago when she'd been turned away. The anger and hurt she'd felt then had transformed into something powerful, a force for change that was spreading across the city and beyond. "Your grandmother would be proud," her mother had told her recently. She always said that sometimes you have to create the change you want to see. And that's exactly what she'd done. She hadn't just bought a building. She'd built a legacy of inclusion that would impact generations to come. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's making sure nobody else has to go through what you did. The store's lights dimmed as closing time approached. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new stories, and new opportunities for change. But tonight, she took a moment to appreciate how far they'd come and dream about how far they could still go. Because this wasn't just a story about buying a building or transforming a store. It was a story about changing minds, opening hearts, and proving that when you fight discrimination with education and opportunity, everybody wins.